Over the past week, authorities have made more than 30 arrests, with more expected in the coming days. Investigators describe the operation as a major blow to the Blood Family Mafia, a violent street gang believed to be responsible for a series of shootings, drug trafficking operations, and targeted killings across Quebec. At the top of their list was the suspected leader, Dave Turmel, also known by the alias Turmel. Police allege he was the driving force behind the organization's rapid rise and its bloody conflict with the Hells Angels over control of Montreal's drug trade. The story of that conflict stretches back several years, but one moment stands out as a turning point. In August 2020, during the quiet hours before dawn in a residential neighborhood of Montreal, a black SUV rolled slowly down a dimly lit street. The engine was kept low, the windows tinted dark. Inside were men who knew exactly why they were there. They had a target. The vehicle stopped. A door opened. Shots rang out, shattering the stillness of the early morning. By the time police arrived, a man lay dead on the front steps of his own home. In the world of organized crime, no one needed an explanation. The killing was widely understood to be part of an escalating war between the Hells Angels and a rising crime boss who had refused to submit to their authority. That man was Dave Turmel. To the public, he would later be portrayed as the architect of the Blood Family Mafia. To the Hells Angels, he was something far more dangerous, a rival who had taken their business, recruited their associates, and openly challenged their dominance over Montreal's lucrative drug market. Dave Turmel was born in Quebec in 1977 and raised in a working-class environment with limited opportunities. Like many young men drawn into street life, he found a sense of belonging in the criminal world. Early on, he learned that in that environment, respect was rarely given freely. It was taken, often by force. By his late teens, he was already involved in drug dealing and street-level violence. But he was ambitious. He did not want to remain a low-ranking participant in someone else's organization. He studied how older criminals operated. He observed how money flowed through networks of dealers and enforcers. He came to understand that true power did not lie in carrying a weapon, but in directing the people who did. By the late 2000s, Montreal's criminal landscape was shifting. Established crime families had been weakened by arrests and internal conflicts. The Hells Angels had moved in to fill the vacuum, solidifying their role as dominant players in drug distribution and enforcement. Rather than confronting them directly at first, Turmel adopted a different strategy. He began building a parallel network. He recruited independent street gangs, absorbed smaller crews, and formed what would become known as the Blood Family Mafia. Unlike traditional organized crime groups bound by rigid hierarchies and long-standing traditions, this new organization was flexible, younger, and focused almost entirely on profit. It operated with a decentralized structure that allowed it to move quickly and adapt. Turmel understood that fear alone would not guarantee loyalty. He offered better financial incentives than rival groups. Dealers who joined his network could keep a larger share of their profits. Enforcers were paid well and given protection. At the same time, betrayal was met with swift and public consequences. By the mid-2000s, the Blood Family Mafia had grown into one of the most aggressive criminal organizations in Montreal. Eventually, expansion brought it into direct competition with the Hells Angels. Turmel began recruiting individuals affiliated with the bikers, offering them better terms and greater autonomy. Slowly, he chipped away at their influence. At first, tensions simmered beneath the surface. There were warnings, isolated assaults, and acts of intimidation. But as more territory and revenue shifted away from the bikers, the conflict intensified. Violence escalated. Dealers linked to one side were targeted by the other. Vehicles were set on fire. Ambushes and drive-by shootings became more frequent. By 2019, Montreal was experiencing a surge in violence tied to the feud. Innocent bystanders occasionally found themselves caught in the crossfire. Law enforcement agencies struggled to contain the fallout. At the center of it all was Turmel. He moved through the city with visible security, rarely appearing without armed associates nearby. To his supporters, he was a bold strategist who had dared to challenge an entrenched power. To his rivals, he was reckless and destabilizing. To the Hells Angels, he represented an existential threat. He was not merely seeking a share of the market. He appeared intent on replacing them entirely. As the war intensified, both sides adopted more calculated tactics. The Hells Angels reportedly assembled teams dedicated to tracking and targeting key figures within the Blood Family Mafia. Turmel, aware of the danger, tightened his inner circle. Meetings were held in rotating locations. Vehicles were changed frequently. Communication methods were constantly updated. Paranoia became part of daily life. There were alleged attempts on his life. In one incident, a convoy believed to be transporting him was ambushed. Gunfire erupted, vehicles were damaged, and one associate was injured. Turmel was not inside the targeted vehicle. Whether the attackers had faulty intelligence or were misled remains unclear. What was certain was that the conflict had reached a new level. The violence destabilized Montreal's underworld. Smaller gangs were pressured to choose sides. Neutrality became risky. Some aligned with the Hells Angels out of fear or long-standing ties. Others sided with the Blood Family Mafia because of the financial opportunities it offered. In such an environment, loyalty was often conditional. Meanwhile, law enforcement intensified its efforts. Police agencies at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels began pooling resources. Surveillance operations expanded. Wiretaps and informants gradually built a picture of a complex network, allegedly involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and orchestrated violence. Investigators focused on proving not just individual crimes, but the existence of a coordinated criminal enterprise with Turmel at its head. As pressure mounted from both rivals and authorities, cracks reportedly began to appear within the Blood Family Mafia. Rapid expansion had brought wealth and influence, but it also introduced vulnerabilities. The larger the organization grew, the harder it became to control. Internal mistrust increased. Some members were suspected of cooperating with rivals or law enforcement. Others defected to competing groups. Turmel's leadership style reportedly became more guarded and severe. Longtime associates were sidelined. Newer recruits were elevated. Such shifts can create instability in any organization, and in the criminal world, instability often leads to fragmentation. Rumors circulated that the once cohesive group was fracturing under the strain of constant conflict. By 2021 and 2022, the war had taken a heavy toll. Montreal experienced a noticeable rise in homicides linked to organized crime disputes. Public concern grew. Media coverage intensified. Political leaders demanded stronger action. Organized crime, typically operating in the shadows, had become highly visible. In March 2023, authorities announced a major operation targeting the Blood Family Mafia. Dave Turmel was arrested in Quebec, along with several associates. Police described him as the alleged mastermind behind a criminal organization responsible for numerous acts of violence and large-scale drug trafficking. For investigators, the arrest marked the culmination of years of work. With Turmel in custody, the balance of power shifted again. The Blood Family Mafia did not immediately disappear, but it fractured. Some members attempted to continue operations independently. Others sought alliances elsewhere. The Hells Angels moved to reassert control over contested territories. The broader criminal landscape remained volatile. Turmel now faces the legal consequences of the war he helped ignite. Authorities allege that he orchestrated a campaign that reshaped Montreal's underworld and contributed to a wave of violence. His supporters may see him as a figure who challenged established powers. Critics view him as a destabilizing force whose ambition fueled bloodshed. What remains clear is that his rise and fall illustrate a familiar pattern within organized crime. Power built on fear and violence is often temporary. Alliances shift, loyalty fades under pressure, law enforcement adapts. Those who attempt to upend entrenched criminal systems frequently discover that those systems are larger and more resilient than any one individual. Dave Turmel's story is not one of glamour or rebellion. It is a cautionary tale about the cost of unchecked ambition in a world governed by intimidation and retaliation. The conflict he entered transformed neighborhoods into battlegrounds and left lasting scars on the city. In the end, the same forces of violence and scrutiny that accompanied his ascent contributed to his downfall. The arrests may signal the close of one chapter, but the broader struggle for control within organized crime networks continues. As history has shown, when one leader falls, another often rises to test the balance of power once again.